How do you like that? I always wanted to do this. Right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 10th, 2026 meeting of Milburn Township Charter Study Commission, which is called to order. In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, Public Laws 1975, be advised that the notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and forwarding to the official designated newspapers that this meeting would take place at the Bauer Center at 8 o'clock on Tuesday, February 10th. Meeting details and draft agenda have been posted. I'll kindly ask everyone to please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Dory, you should be honest, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Of course, this is like
I know. All right. I will now ask Dr. Khan for to note those who are present, please.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Dr. Kung is present. Ms. Parker Lentz? Mr. Tenna?
Here.
Mr. Drucker?
Here.
I note that we also have Council Suzanne Savasco of King Mansion Collins in attendance.
The record will show that we have a quorum for this meeting. Did everyone have a chance to read the agenda?
Yes.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Yes, second.
Corey? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. May I have a motion to approve the February 2nd, 2026 meeting minutes? Hopefully everyone read them. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are there any commissioners with reports since our last meeting?
Sure. So at the Township Committee meeting on February 3rd, I provided an update on the Charter Study Commission's work thus far. Between that presentation and the articles that were published in Tap and Patch last week, we've been getting pretty good feedback from the folks who are paying attention. So it's very encouraging.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. Anyone else?
Mr. Biller and I have started our outreach to get in touch with township officials from other towns that were on our list that we have made a preliminary study of in terms of different forms of government they're following and so on and so forth. If anybody has suggestions of any particular names we should reach out to, feel free to email us. Otherwise, we're just gonna look at the officials at various townships that we wanna prioritize and just see who's available to the interview.
Chinook already reached out to Red Bank. Obviously, they're one of our primary, given that they've recently gone through the study, so we wanted to talk to them first, or one of the first. Gotcha.
I thought, somebody mentioned to me about Verona. Is that on your list?
I don't even think it's on the list, maybe, because, you know, I restricted it by towns that have a certain population, downtown, things like that, so,
We have about
I
15
think Verona
towns.
has,
They have nonpartisan, it came up in one of our interviews.
okay, right,
do they
right.
have a downtown, or? They have like a strip, like a road.
It like
I
goes
don't know if
into
it's-
like the next town.
Yeah.
We'll fill out any,
Let,
not really a downtown.
let it be known that Miss Joanna Parker Lenz, another charter commissioner, has just arrived. She will be fined $10. In our kangaroo court.
Good to know, just don't come.
Thank you.
He's gonna appeal that.
Thank you, Corey. All right, public comment. To speak during the public comment period, please follow these instructions. Ensure your Zoom display name shows your first and last name. Click the raise hand button. You will be called upon in order and promoted to panelists. Please turn on your video when called to speak. Clearly state your full name and whether you're a Millburn resident or a business owner to facilitate an orderly meeting and permit all to be heard. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. A reminder that the public comment period is an opportunity for residents to share their views with the commission. Commissioners will not respond to questions or engage in dialogue during the speaking time, but will carefully consider all comments. At the end of the public comment period, questions and discussions may be addressed at the chair's discretion. Dr. Khan, is there anyone on Zoom that wants to speak?
Anyone online is wishing to speak, you may raise hand now. No one wishes to be heard.
Okay, I now close the first comment period. Are there any comments from the commission regarding any comments made by the public? Obviously not.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do old business. Interviews. Tonight, we'll be conducting a public interview with current Mayor Frank Saccamundo and Deputy Mayor Dave Cosgrove. These interviews are part of our systematic fact-finding process to understand how Millburn's government operates in practice. We've already interviewed municipal employees, including department heads and staff, and we're currently in the process of speaking with current and former elected officials. The information we gather will help inform our analysis and ultimate recommendations to voters. And personally, and from the commission, we are grateful to Committeeman Saccamundo and Cosgrove for agreeing to participate in these public interviews, which allow our residents to observe our fact-finding process firsthand. The questions this evening were provided in advance to both interviewees. Ms. Parker Lenz and I will facilitate this interview. Ms. Patana, Mr. Villa, and Dr. Khan may also ask follow-up questions as needed. I now welcome the two committeemen to the front of the room, which they are. All right. All right. Let me start off, please. And since everyone knows you gentlemen, let's just start in with the questions, if you guys don't mind, okay? Let's Dave, let's start with you, and then Frank, you'll, I'm gonna ask the questions, and Dave will answer, and then you'll answer, and then maybe when Joanna does it, you'll answer, then Dave will answer. Is that agreeable, guys? Good. David, and I'm gonna call you by your first name, as opposed to, it takes too long. What does a typical week look like for you as a TC member, and how much time does the position require?
So the,
No, I just wanted, I just noticed Jeff walked in.
okay.
I just
Down the hall.
want-
So a typical work week is probably 3 or 4 meetings. Depends on the week, you know, for the committees that we all cover as, you know, as extra. Probably about maybe 10 to 20 hours a week, and that depends on the week. Some weeks are lighter than others.
Great, thank you. Frank?
So I would be inclined to agree with Dave, probably around 20 hours. Now that I'm mayor, I'd say it's quite a bit more than that. So I would estimate at this point it's 30 to 35 hours a week. It's sort of like having a second job, almost. And you know, I think it also can vary. There are some committee members that are on, you know, more committees than others. I know that when Tara was on the in her final year, she wasn't on any committees. So for her, you know, it would have been for a few hours, but for me personally, right now, it's about 35 hours a week.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up question? Because now that we have this unique position of like, you just switched over and you said the hours would have been this. Is it because of all the outside social commitments? Because, you know, the mayor typically shows up to the grand openings and the hellos and the goodbyes and all the parties. Like, what have you seen as the big differentiator for you?
So there's a lot of that, but there's also dealing with a lot of residents. For some reason, you know, I think people are not really aware that the mayor is just another committee person and they don't have any sort of magical powers. But it seems like since I became mayor, I get a lot more emails, a lot more phone calls, a lot more people reaching out to me about this, that, or the other thing, especially right after the storm. You know, I'm the type of person that I try to respond to everyone and help them out, and so that takes a lot of time. But you know, that can vary depending, you know, from mayor to mayor. They may do things different.
One more really important question. Has anyone asked you to marry them?
I have not had to perform a wedding.
I was shocked when that was one of the powers of the honorary mayor position.
The mayor and the deputy mayor.
And the deputy mayor, you
both
can
able to perform.
marry people.
Marry.
And now you have the unique opportunity to become the emergency management, you know, signatory as well.
Yes, I did get to do that
Yeah.
earlier this year.
Thank you. How long did it take you to feel comfortable, become effective in the role, and what was the hardest part? David?
I'd say maybe about 3 months to get acclimated. I'll throw into that mix that I've been going to meetings for about 3 years, maybe, and change. You know, so I kind of had a general idea, at least from an outsider's perspective of what was going on. So I think that's about right. 3 months to get in there. I mean, I'm always learning new stuff, you know, so depending on what issues, you know, pop up and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Frank?
So I too had been going to meetings for about 1.5 years prior to being elected. I would say it takes a few months to get acclimated, obviously, but I would say the entire first year, you're really still figuring things out. I see it as like the first year is about getting introduced to it, figuring out how everything works, and then sort of getting into a rhythm. Year 2 is where I think a lot of good stuff happens. Year 3, then you're worried about, you know, potentially running for re-election again, or you're laying down, right? So that would be sort of how I see it.
Right. I failed to ask Dave a follow-up question. Now, what was the hardest part, would you say?
Specifically of getting acclimated.
Yeah.
While you're looking that up, Frank, just as far as the lame duck aspect of it, so what are sort of more difficulties that you faced? Sort of, well, I mean, you never did in that sort of lame duck part, so.
Yeah, that's new to me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I was
The
just,
lame
I was
duck
curious, like,
is
for the township committee, you know, I do appreciate that the third year you're starting to run, but, or potentially being in the lame duck, so I'm kind of curious how the impact on it's more obvious to me how running can impact your time and efforts and things, and even decision making, but I wonder how.
So I would say in your third year, if you're running for reelection, then you have to be a little bit more cognizant about the projects you bring forward and the votes that you take, because they're going to be scrutinized more heavily because of the upcoming election. If you are not running again, you're a lame duck, then I would imagine the issue there would be that you might not have the ability to see something through. So, you know, if you were to try and start an initiative, it might die on the vine, and depending where you are in your cycle, for example, if there's 3 months left, your time in office, you might not be the one to want to champion, you know, whatever new initiative the town needs.
We're gonna get to those. We're gonna get to those questions.
I think just learning, you know, what happens on the other side, so what goes on in town hall, who's in charge of what, and how they interact,
Mhm.
and interact with us.
Thank
Not
you.
necessarily hard, but just.
When you joined the TC, how much institutional knowledge carried over from previous members? Were there ongoing projects you had to pick up midstream? Dave?
I think there was plenty of institutional knowledge, because I was a year where there's, you know, one person running.
Mhm.
So there were still 4 people that, you know, that were on the board and had been for, you know, for varying periods of time, obviously. But, so institutional knowledge, I think, was there. I didn't feel like, you know, I needed to call the person who left, you know, and said, what was up with this? You know, like I might have done, you know, whenever we worked in our various jobs, I call, you know, the old person saying,
Right.
what was this about? So, and then the second part, sorry.
Were there ongoing projects you had to pick up midstream?
There were, I think there was, certainly fair share issues, you know, which continue even now. There was, trying to think, there was another one that was kind of ongoing. Town hall was going up, you know, on and off, so I think that was there. Those are the ones that popped to mind.
Great. Frank, do you want me to ask the question again, or you got it?
Why don't you ask it again, because I don't
Okay,
know if the
yeah.
one I have is exactly what you have.
When you joined the TC, how much institutional knowledge carried over from previous members? Were there ongoing projects you had to pick up midstream?
So that's a good one. So when I joined the TC, it was both me and Ben joining, so there were 2 people that came off. I was fortunate enough that the prior mayor took it upon herself to get in touch with me and share a lot of things with me. That was sort of a typical. I did not get that same sort of knowledge transfer from Michael Ornette. And, you know, I think part of that may have had to do with the fact that we were opposite parties. But, you know, there is a lot that you have to sort of pick up on. And, you know, I think the town hall renovation that Dave mentioned is very interesting. That's something that we sort of had to pick up midstream from the previous TC. So, you know, one of the things that I found challenging about that is all of a sudden we were given this design and the town hall looked like a prison. It was a terrible design, and we ended up, you know, being able to pivot and improve upon that. But, you know, we didn't have a whole backstory as to why all of a sudden we were being given this design, and you know, were there other permutations before, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I do think that depending how many TC members turn over in a given year, that really affects the amount of institutional knowledge that progresses. I think another example of you know, a project that, you know, was sort of midstream, but didn't really get carried forward too well was the Temple Park Gateway project. So that was something that was actually, I think they made decisions in what I would call the lame duck phase. It was after the election, it was clear that two of those individuals were not going to be on the TC anymore. I'd have to go back and look at the minutes, but I do think decisions were made around that time. And that sort of died on the vine when the new TC came in because there was no one there to champion that project. Now, we've since picked it back up again, but that took like an entire year before we got, actually 2 years before we really.
I am very happy that the current TC picked up Gateway to Milburn, because 2 administrations ago, when Gateway to Milburn first came, Chris Drucker was very involved in that. And I went in front of the previous two administrations ago, and I made a presentation, and all 5 of them voted to have a architect engineer come in and do a master plan for the gateway to the tune of $160,000, and it freaking went nowhere. We spent 160 grand, and one of the previous mayors didn't approve, and I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to get too involved, but that is something that I am passionate about. I'm a park and rec guy, and I think our oak tree that's over 100 years old should be preserved. Well, I know Stacy, our town forester, has been looking at it, but the gazebo is from the 60s, and that whole area can be utilized. Unbelievable.
We did declare, one of the things that I worked on was getting Taylor Park designated as historic.
Mm-hmm.
So it is now considered one of our historic landmarks.
Will we get some more grants?
Potentially.
Right.
Can I ask a quick practical question? I know that some of us are loudspeakers, some of us are not. Are we sure that the public will be hearing, because we're recording some very important questions and answers? Are there,
That
from a mic.
picks up
it picks up everything.
It picks up
Fabulous.
too much.
I was
So,
curious.
for example, when I was watching this last time from home, I could hear people in the audience talking.
Fantastic.
Yeah, one we used for the TC meetings actually one time picked up people in the back row swearing.
And it was,
Oh.
and the board was facing away from it.
It wasn't him.
Right, 'cause I just want to make sure before we have to say, hey,
But I mean,
project
it
more,
is
because I'm a big
Right.
theatrical person, so I'm
Right.
like, give me more voice.
Okay, let's, let me continue on. The term is currently 3 years. Based on your experience, is that adequate time to learn the job and see projects through? Dave, please.
Yeah, I'll give you a mixed answer on this one.
Okay.
I think,
Politician.
no, I'll tell you why, though. I'll tell you why, because I thought about this. 4 was my knee-jerk answer to this. 4 years would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started thinking, is that me, Dave Cosgrove, saying I want 4 years? I run, I put the effort and time in, or is 4 years good for the residents? And my thought process on that is that, if residents vote for me, thinking they like my policies, they like what, and they think I'm gonna do what they want done, and I don't, or I turn out to be a dud. If I'm there for 4 years, now they're stuck with me for 4 years. So I think I don't know if there's a clear answer there. Because you say 3 years, if I'm not doing what my constituents want, they can get rid of me in 3 years. Otherwise, they're stuck with 4 years. But my preference is 4. But just a thought that, to think of this from the point of view of, the whole charter commission, actually, to think of it from the point of view of better for residents or better for politicians.
Technically, there is a recall, right?
Huh? There's a really, the likelihood of it could happen.
But even
The
not that
likelihood
much.
is
People are
pretty
really
similar.
pissed.
But all joking aside, even not that much. If somebody's unhappy with either your work ethic or they can approach you. So they can, while you're in term, they can approach you and maybe you change your mind or maybe you don't, but there is some recourse while you're in office. So I kind of want to hear more about the sort of the candidate perspective then. So
Yeah.
why would you say 4 years?
4 years because, you know, running is an effort.
Mhm.
It gives you 4 years to do it. I don't know that there's a magic to it, like, you know, I don't feel like I'm not gonna accomplish something in 3 that I would accomplish in 4.
Okay.
You know, Frank's comment about, you know, being a lame duck, you know, in, let's say, year 3 or year 4, and maybe not being able to, you know, to be able to force something through, or not force it, but, you know, to convince people to force it through, maybe that's a little, you know, but I think most projects can get done in 3 years. But
Right.
4 would be my answer on that, but.
Frank?
I think 3 years is definitely not sufficient. As I said before, I think year 1 is, you know, getting your sea legs. Year 2 is when you're really getting into the swing of things, starting some initiatives. But then year 3, you know, you're either worried about reelection or you turn into a pumpkin at the end of your term. I think 4 years really would be the right length of time. As far as, you know, the concern Dave brought up about, you know, that not being good for the residents. My answer to that would be, I hope this charter commission will look at forms of government that offer recall initiative, because that can solve some of those issues. So if you have a alternate form of government, right, and the TC passes an ordinance that you don't like, well, you can do a referendum, you can force a referendum on that, or there's a way to recall that and force a vote. So I think some of these more modern components we're lacking would address, you know, any potential downside to a 4-year term. And from a candidate's perspective, you know, having to run every 3 years, that is a lot. It takes a lot of effort, and the amount of time that you're taking for campaigning is time that is potentially being taken away from other things like your TC duties or your work or your life balance. So, you know, having 4 years, I think, would be the right number. That's my recommendation.
Thank you. Moving on. Milburn has TC elections every year. From your perspective, as an elected official, how does that affect governance? Dave.
Yeah, it's obviously got different, if it's a year when there's 2 people being elected versus 1, I think there's a difference, obviously, this year losing 2 people, get 2 new people. The effect, I mean, I guess it's different than the question I think I had on the list, but I don't disagree with the lame duck aspect of, you know, like that Frank had mentioned. And it's, you know, I don't know if that answers your question now at all. Does it?
Yeah, that's good.
Follow ups, anybody?
Frank, can you,
Sure.
let me read it again?
I got it.
You got it?
The elections every year. I think elections every year are problematic from a number of different perspectives. I think from the public perspective, I think people are tired of having to go through a campaign cycle every single year. You know, it's just, it's a lot. And then, you know, from a more practical standpoint, you know, there's been significant turnover, particularly in recent years. Even I think decades ago, you know, you had TC members that stayed and, you know, some held their seats for 10 years, right? But in the past few years, it seems like there's been a lot of turnover, and depending on the year, you could have 40% of the TC turning over. So, you know, that causes some problems. And let me give an example of this. So back in 2021, the Affordable Housing Agreement was signed. The median tenure of a TC member during that time was just 1.5 years. And 2 members of that TC that ultimately made the decisions had only been in office for 6 months. And one of them was the key negotiators, and they were added to the subcommittee during their first year. So you had people coming in that had no prior experience. I don't know if they had been attending TC meetings long beforehand, and in the case of the affordable housing, that process was done completely in the dark behind closed doors. So even if they had attended TC meetings, they wouldn't have any knowledge that they gained. So they were just sort of dropped into it and had to make a decision that was gonna have impacts for years and years to come. So, I think that, that's an example of why we shouldn't have elections every year, because there's too much turnover. Government moves slowly by design, and to me, I would recommend elections maybe every 2 years. I think that, that's how Congress does it. I think that's a lot more reasonable. If you had a 4-year term and every 2 years you're changing half of the committee, that's a better way to do it.
That seems to be a theme, folks that we've been interviewing. I'm gonna now turn over the next set of questions to Commissioner Joanna Parker-Williams.
Thank you. So let's go into partisan and local governance. Township committee elections are partisan. Based on your experience governing, how much does party affiliation matter for local issues? Anybody want to start in particular on that one, that hot item?
I could start.
Great.
I don't think the decisions, that we make at the township committee level are partisan. And I think if you look at, the votes this year, the votes last year, they're across party lines. There is some rhyme and reason to it, because I think you can see how certain members vote on certain issues, but it's really never been just a straight party vote, as far as I can tell. The Republicans voted one way, and the Democrats voted the other, and vice versa. So, I think I don't think it has. I do think party affiliation informs voters on what they may be getting on a vote, or the way a person feels about certain things. If you belong to a certain club, a Democratic club, a Republican club, whatever it is, as a voter, it's going to inform me that, okay, this person probably will or may vote a certain way on a local issue, on a conservative financial issue, not spending money, spending money. Having said that, some of the on the local level, right? I've seen money being spent where Frank and I voted against it, and where so it's an example of, okay, on the local level it didn't make a difference, but as a voter, certainly I think I'd want to know that before I pull the lever on a certain candidate.
Before we go to you, Frank, since you touched upon our next question, actually, if I could just, maybe that's
I'm
a
sorry.
follow-up. No, it's great, actually, because we can follow up on it. I segued perfectly into it, and then Frank will let you think about that for a second. You were giving, while not specific, examples of TC votes or decisions where party affiliation guided how members voted, but you touched upon that they could. In your shorter experience, have you noticed, you said an example of how you didn't, your party affiliations, you're on different parties in case people don't know in the public, and yet you voted together on things and others in the party voted. So it was incongruent with your parties per se. So in the specific situations that you might think about and you kind of cited now, did you feel that party affiliation had any bearing really on how you would vote, maybe think about things nationally? You literally just said you might have voted with Frank on a particular issue. Is there specific examples that you might have seen party lines aligning or not aligning?
Gotcha. The recent election of mayor, I think that was absolutely along party lines until the end. But
Okay.
but that was this. So that's an example, but I do think most other than that advance with the mayor, I do think that people have voted, across the lines. On the local level.
I have two follow-ups and it's for both of you. One is, do you see any?
Let's let
Okay.
Frank
Okay.
speak and then, because I have a question also.
So yeah, do you want to tackle the part A and part B on those? The township committee elections are partisan statement. Based on your experience governing, how much does party affiliation matter for local issues?
Let me do that one first.
Perfect.
And read the vote.
Mhm.
So, look, I don't think any of the local issues we face are partisan in nature. The roads, parks, the DPW, like none of these should be partisan issues, and I don't think party affiliation should matter.
Housing, can I throw that in there for 1 second? Not to cut you off at housing.
Housing, that's interesting because I think what we've seen in our town is people's thoughts on housing policy doesn't fall along party lines. And I think the majority of people in town have a certain view of that. Now, I do think that something that David said of how, the party can help inform candidates. I think that's not the case. And the reason I bring that up, when I got into local politics, I was a Democrat. I'd been a Democrat for over a decade. Now, because I had started going to meetings and I was speaking out against the, all Democrat TC, there was no way that they would let me run as a Democrat. So I had to change parties just to run. And, I don't align myself with, the one party or another 100%. So, to me, that was a barrier that I had to overcome to run, and that's a barrier that others might not overcome. And then I would say, my Republican label, I don't think the way I vote, some of the initiatives that I've pushed, like the gas-powered leak blower restrictions, that's something that would be traditionally unpopular with the Republican Party, and yet I was one of the ones championing it, right? So, to me, I think that putting a partisan label on a local election actually does a disservice to the community because it doesn't necessarily inform what you're going to get. Because how someone, votes on local issues might be different than how they think about things nationally. And quite honestly, because we have a two-party system, you might end up having someone that had to choose one party or another, and they don't necessarily subscribe to all of the beliefs of that party. And there was
You had a follow-up, Corey.
Well, so Frank, you just answered one of my follow-ups, and that was gonna be, is there a risk, David, you had mentioned that party affiliation can inform decision-making and vote, so the counter to that, is there a risk about party affiliation informing a vote? So you kind of just answered that right there. So Dave, I'm just interested in your perspective, do you think there's a risk of party affiliation for informing a vote?
There's certainly a risk. Frank's example is a good example about the leak blower, right?
Wouldn't that depend on the person though? If you
That
guys
depends on the
think
person,
about that for a
you know.
minute, right?
I
Depends
guess
on the
what-
person, right?
I guess what I'm just making the distinguishing factor to me is if someone's going to vote for somebody, it provides information. I agree, there's no guarantee that someone who you thinks is gonna vote one way is going to.
Mhm.
And then you're back to that, my comment earlier about the 3 years versus the 4 years,
But just because
Go ahead.
and then this is more of answering the question they ask is when we were running, we were talking to a bunch of people, and one of the things people were concerned about, the people who are concerned about partisan elections is, hey, you might have people then voting completely uninformed because there isn't a large news source for information for TC. And so they're like, oh, I tend to be Democrat or I vote Democrat, so I'm gonna vote Democrat, not knowing anything about the person and their politics and their views and things like that. And so they view that as a potential risk of partisan elections, is that they're using it to inform their vote, but it's misinformation arguably, or potentially. Because, maybe that person, when they're on the TC or,
would not vote for the leaf blower
Right, or
perhaps.
something, even
if
though
you were one
they're
party or another.
aligned with the D, in fact, they wouldn't vote for the leaf blower or something like that. And so there's some concern that having party affiliations, while informative, could be a negative information piece or something, because they don't do the work to find out about what their actual opinions are, plans and things like that. So I was wondering if you saw that as a genuine concern, or is that not, you don't think it's a genuine?
I don't think so. I think, because I think that voter, you know, who's,
Uninformed.
yeah, who's
Or just,
uninformed.
well, going down the line, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no,
It's
the
like, oh, it's
line
just
voting,
local,
someone
the
who
line
walks in
vote-
the
the line
booth and
voting.
just pulls the lever, R across the board, D across the board, or whatever, you know, because that's what they've done. I don't know how you fix that, I think that person's still gonna be out there, even if we're nonpartisan.
Right,
You know, I'd like to think that people listen to like the presentations and the debates that we all did over time, and papers that you put out, et cetera, and you know, use the available information that, okay, Cosgrove's a Democrat, he's probably, you know, he may very well vote a certain way.
Well, people will still know your affiliation, and you know, this is the debate that people have been having with us, like. If it becomes nonpartisan, your personal affiliation is not a secret,
No, could be, I mean,
unless you're all
Yeah.
It
running
may be hard to
unaffiliated.
find, I mean, you know, who's supporting you financially in, you know, who's.
well, and quite
that kind of
frankly, the
stuff.
people who take the effort to find out your party affiliation are probably also gonna take the effort to learn more about you and listen to
Hopefully,
speeches and
yeah.
things like that. It's the people who are showing up, who are just voting for a national election or something like that, and just,
Well, might they not vote for anybody?
yeah, that's possible, yeah.
Right, that's the
I have
question.
some insights I
It's
think
not a
I
question,
can
but-
offer on this.
And I still have
So,
that second.
if it's a presidential election year, you're gonna get a certain number of voters that come out that don't vote in any other year. I've seen the voter data, I don't have it in front of me, but there's a significant number of voters that show up only for presidential elections. Then you have, that's the most participation you get, then you have congressional years, second most, and then the gubernatorial years. This year was a little bit of an anomaly. This year was more like a congressional year in terms of turnout. Now, there is and I've seen multiple years of data on this now, there is a certain number of votes that you will get just by running as a Republican. I'm not gonna share that number because I don't think it's relevant, but it is a significant number. There is a certain number of votes that you will get just by running as a Democrat. You don't even have to run a campaign in either case. There's a certain baseline number of votes you're gonna get, and those are the people that just blindly vote the line, right? And I think that that does a disservice. Now, I think what was interesting is when you had the Charter Commission, when you look at the total number of votes cast versus the number of votes cast for the Charter Commission, you're seeing a difference, because I think people that were just used to voting the line and weren't paying attention to anything, when it came time to vote for you guys, they may have left that blank. Same thing with the school board, right? They're nonpartisan. If you look at, there's more people that vote for, you know, the top of the ticket, and will go across the line, and they don't flip it over and vote for the BOE. So I think if you have nonpartisan elections, what you would end up doing is you would have the people that are voting in those are the ones that are going to be more informed. And you know, I think that just overall is going to make for you know, a better rundown.
Even if it's fewer voters potentially voting, because we
Even if
already
it's
have fewer voters, is
'cause
your
it's-
point, right?
It's voters that have taken the time to learn about the candidates and the issues. And I also think that, you know, it's like with the BOE, they're nonpartisan. You know, people do, they ask around, oh, BOE, like, all right, what is this person about? What's that person about? Who should I vote for? They actually take the time to do the research. I was sitting as a poll watcher one time, and someone came in, the voting was about to close, and she pulled out her phone and she was trying to research presumably some of the candidates. You're not allowed to do that in the election, still the woman to that. But I think, you know, if there is no party affiliation, then people will be forced to do their homework. And if they don't, then honestly, they were probably just voting a party line before, and that's not beneficial.
What about a follow-up question on
Of
this?
course, yeah.
This is something that I've been thinking about since we've been interviewing, you know, we interview you folks in private, and now we're in the midst of interviewing, you know, former TC members. And should there be a cap on how much a candidate in Milburn Township should spend on his or her election? And don't be afraid to hammer
Can I
me,
give you a
because-
part one to the question?
Right.
This is only if there
It's-
is a
yeah.
nonpartisan, because this was a concern for one of the former TC folks. They said if you no longer have a budget from a party and you have to raise all the money yourself, right? What happens if somebody has funds here, but this person who doesn't have the funds may be more qualified, there's no party affiliation, how does that level set one person over another in terms of, you know, finances?
Thank you, Joanna.
But
Joanna,
that's part one and part two.
right, Joanna posed the question a lot more eloquently than I did.
Well, you had part two, I had part one.
Okay,
So we
so.
finish each other.
So I think nonpartisan elections actually would help reduce the amount of money that is spent in elections overall. There is a small percentage of money that comes from the county, at least on the Republican side. There's a small amount of money that we get from the county party. The rest of it, we raise from residents in the town. On the other side, there's money that comes from the party. They tend to funnel it through, you know, other politicians from that party as opposed to necessarily getting a large chunk from the county. I think if you take the partisan money out of it, then candidates are having to go to those residents themselves and raise the funds. And I think you're gonna find that you're gonna have less over the top campaigns. I think it's gonna lower the barrier to entry, so that, you know, individuals that wanna run, they're not necessarily competing against, you know, someone who's raising $100,000 a year for an election cycle, because they're not gonna have that party to fall back on. They're not gonna be able to go to, you know, the big donors in that party and say, oh, I've noticed that you've donated, you know, on a national level in a big way.
Mhm.
I'm running as X party, would you donate to me too? I think the donations you're gonna get are gonna be from residents that are truly invested and believe in you. And so I think that will sort of level the playing field a lot more. So I think that would be a benefit, not a detriment. If we were nonpartisan, I think you're gonna see less outside. You're certainly not gonna see outside money coming in like you see in some elections in the past.
Can we just put Chris's question on the forefront for a moment, though? Would you think it would be important in that case, while it may level set, let's say one person's a little more popular, still has some affiliations that might be RD, whatever, that might just be like, oh, I'm gonna support you because I like you, it doesn't matter. Is there a cap that would be important, because now you no longer have? And then Dave, you'll think about that.
I don't know that a cap would be necessary. I think that naturally you're gonna see the amount of money that's
Go
spent
down.
come down. You know, the person that raises the most money isn't necessarily the person that wins the election. We've certainly seen that. That's not always the case.
Okay.
So, yeah, if you wanted, I don't know what a reasonable cap would be, right? Would I say 100,000? Would I say 150,000? I think the most expensive campaign I was involved in raised about $100,000 and spent close to that, which I think is ridiculous. I think
That's
that's
for
nuts.
local,
I
got
don't
it.
think you should have to raise $100,000 to win in a local election. Because at that point, you're starting to run a campaign like you would for a much larger office, and I just don't think that's beneficial for the residents.
I don't know if you can cap it. Would be the lawyer thing says, I don't know if you can. I don't, having been through it, I don't think you need a cap because it's hard to raise money. I mean, some of you have run, et cetera. But I also think that I'm not convinced at all that, nonpartisan elections, that money disappears that you were gonna get. I still think that money flows, from your party affiliation, or at least a lot of it. So I don't think that that's gonna spread out if you have 5 people running unaffiliated, nonpartisan. I don't know that money disappears.
I think one point I would like to add, because the donations are public. I've had instances where I've had Democrats say, you know what, I want to support your campaign. I believe in your message, but I can only give you up to the amount that allows me to remain anonymous because I will get skewered by my friends and neighbors if they see that I donated to a Republican. Now, obviously, the inverse could be true as well, right?
I did have that in my campaign. A Republican wanted to donate, did the same thing and said, I can $200 or whatever it was.
Right, and that actually happened quite a bit during my campaign. And so I think, that limited things. And, look, there's been there's been candidates, that I've seen in my life that are of an opposite party that maybe I would have liked to have donated to, but would be reticent to do that if that was going to be known. But if it was nonpartisan, people would think there's attention to that. Also, I mean, if it were nonpartisan, they would just be affiliated and so.
So my follow-up question, it has to do with partisanship but not elections, is for both of you, do you think party affiliation is important or relevant for county and state relationships and getting stuff done for the township?
I'll take so I think it is not. You would think that it would be, but then let's look at what we had the last 2 years. We had Annette Romano as the mayor. She has very tight relationships with people in the county. That's something that's well known, well established. And we didn't really get a whole lot of additional funding versus when we've had other mayors. And in fact, I think towns that are partisan, those county politicians may say, well, we don't need to spend money in Milburn because they're a blue town. They're going to vote for us anyway. We don't have to buy their vote. Whereas another town where it's maybe a little bit more mixed or they're nonpartisan, they actually may spend more money there because they want to entice people to vote for them. And I think there's been specific instances that I don't have them in front of me. I can get back to you on it. But I believe there's been specific instances where exactly that has been the case. Now, also, there's nothing stopping. I'm mayor, I'm Republican. I have a meeting set up with the county next week, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to ask for stuff. We had an event at the Chinese Association event, and I invited Rosie Begoli. She's our assemblywoman. She's a Democrat. No one thought to invite her. Called her up and invited her. So I don't think that having the party affiliation is going to be able to get you more or less from the county. I think if you're nonpartisan, you might have a better chance of getting more out of the county because they're not going to think, oh, well, they're a guaranteed, blue or a guaranteed red now, right?
So let me ask you this question. I'm sorry we're going. This is a important
I don't think that's a
question.
guarantee.
But David didn't answer the question.
I'm sorry,
yet.
David, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The party affiliation, I don't think it's a guarantee. I don't think there's any guarantee that if I had tremendous, connections, in Newark, that I'm gonna get money necessarily. So.
It's actually true because how long did it take the county to finally pave Glen Ave? And I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but when Joanna and I and Jerry and I, when we interview former TC members, somebody said, since we're a affluent community, we seem to get less service and less dough coming back to Milburn Township. So that's it's an interesting point.
Mhm.
But anyway, I'm
Well, no,
sorry.
but it actually leads right into the next
Okay.
question, what you're saying. When you think about issues like road maintenance, trash collection, budget planning, public safety, do these issues have a partisan dimension? How so? If yes or no, or if yes, so.
My vote first, you, I don't think there's a partisan dimension at all to that. I'm more than certain on that.
No, I don't think these issues have a partisan dimension, and I think the example I gave with the leaf blowers earlier was a good example of how, you know, some of us voted, you know, opposite of what our party, you know, traditionally would have voted for. So I don't think it's a partisan issue at all.
Oh,
Trash collection.
right.
What's partisan about that?
You both have touched upon this in the last couple of questions, but I was going to state it. Some have suggested that nonpartisan local elections would help focus on local issues rather than national politics, while others believe party labels help voters. You've both touched upon it a bit in, you know, for each side. What's your reaction to the idea of nonpartisan elections for Milburn specifically, since you live here and, you know, this is being debated? Dave, do you want to start that? You don't have to if you don't want to. If you want.
No,
to, either
that's
way.
fine, I'm just,
Really, the bottom line is, what's your reaction to the idea of nonpartisan elections for Milburn?
yeah, I think nonpartisan is fine, but I don't know if it's the best thing for the voters. So,
Best thing for the voters or best thing for Milburn Township?
for Milburn Township, well, the voters.
Well, the voters are,
It's-
the residents, right?
The rest, okay, gotcha.
David, if it was a yes or no question, what would you pick? I mean, obviously there are trade-offs involved in both scenarios. But if you were to ask to say, would you support nonpartisan or would you?
I'd say,
support
yeah, you said you
I
got
don't
two
mean to,
choices.
you can say you don't want to
Yeah.
box yourself in, I'm just. asking.
Nonpartisan would be my pick.
Okay.
But I also think you're, as a committee, you know, you should be looking not what I want.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you're one person. Which is
Well,
why
I'm
we
clearly
like this.
ignoring everything you want.
That's
That's
everywhere.
Look, each person has an
My
opinion,
kids
right?
ignore it.
I feel you there.
I think this is a very important question, and because we were provided them in advance, I actually made some notes on this because there's some points I wanted to convey. So I mean, I think that nonpartisan local elections would absolutely increase engagement and improve governance. I recently read a book by Urza Klein called Why We're Polarized. He's a New York Times columnist, and he discusses fascinating research on group psychology. The research shows that when you divide people into two groups, even arbitrary, meaningless groups, they often accept worse outcomes for themselves as long as it increases the gap between their group and the other group. They'd rather win than actually get better results. This is called the gratuitous determination, and it's exactly what partisan labels create at the local level. And I actually believe that this thinking is what led to the poor decisions in 2021 with the affordable housing movement. At that time, you had a single party, all Democratic TC, and they seemed to be more focused on blaming the Republicans of the past for inaction, you know, rather than negotiating the best possible outcome for Milburn. They accepted a suboptimal agreement, one that was worse for the town overall, because it allowed them to claim victory over the other side, rather than thinking about what was best for Milburn as a whole. Partisan framework created an incentive to score political points. You know, I've also seen in this recent election that many of the voters didn't seemed to want to hear what the candidate stood for. One, particular individual was labeled as a party, loyalist, and the other side exploited that, and despite all of the great things that this individual brought to the table, there are a lot of people that just couldn't overlook that. And my campaign on behalf of that individual, people would say, you know what, I love this person, I've known them for years and years, and I would vote for them except for the fact that they're a member of this party and I just can't bring myself to vote for any member of that party. Even though I like this individual, I think they'd make a great leader, I can't do it, right? And that happened more commonly than you would think. And I think that's really unfortunate because that shows that there are people in town that are putting party above practicality, putting party above their own self-interest. So I personally think that nonpartisan local elections are absolutely the way to go. And I also think it'll keep national politics out of our local elections. I think this past campaign cycle showed that people were trying to bring national into a local election, and those national issues had absolutely nothing to do with anything we're doing on a local level, right? What do turf fields have to do with immigration policy, right? What do fixing traffic and improving the roadways and the services the town offers, what does that have to do, with gun control, for instance, right? Like, these are apples and oranges, and when you have a partisan election, it allows that stuff to get pulled in, and I think that causes people to make decisions and vote for candidates that they ordinarily wouldn't vote for if party wasn't involved.
Can I follow up one question? Because I'm thinking about this and I think I understand what you're talking about, but you said you may go unaffiliated, but what if the folks who are running aren't unaffiliated? Don't you think that my couple of questions ago, people will find out what party you are? I don't think it's that hard to find out. So if somebody really cares, if you're not unaffiliated, don't you think they'd have the same reaction? That, hey, he's still a blah, 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 and I don't want to vote for him because that's the party label on a national level. On a local, we're not talking about it, but.
Yeah, so 45% of the voters in town are unaffiliated. And I think if we look at the school board, they're nonpartisan, and we've had far more of a balance over the past 10 years of Republicans and Democrats getting elected to the school board than we have with the TC. It's actually quite surprising. If you go back, look up the party affiliation, all the school board members going back 10 years, you're going to see that there's a lot more even of a mix. And so I think that shows that simply being nonpartisan, there's a lot of people who won't bother to look it up. And I think that the other big problem with the partisan election system is we've got 45% of the electorate out there. And if they want to run for office, they have to pick a party, right? And a lot of people that are unaffiliated, they're in the middle. They're like me. They don't necessarily subscribe to all the beliefs of one party or another. And it's a tall order to get someone to go that's deliberately unaffiliated and pick a party just to run. I mean, we saw a few years ago, Diane Iglo and Dave Morrow tried to run as independents. That didn't work out too well for them because, as I said before, there's a certain number of votes you get for running as a Democrat, a certain number of votes you get for running as a Republican. If you want unaffiliated voters to be able to participate and run, and there's a lot of them that could make great contributions, I think you really need to be nonpartisan.
You have the floor.
Yeah, I mean, Diane and Dave Morrow running is an example of how someone can run that's unaffiliated. both of them, I think, had been affiliated, at least Diane for sure had been, with the Democratic Party, but they couldn't run, they didn't win. And maybe it's a function of, people that went in and just pulled the D lever or, or the R lever. But it's, that option is still out there for people. And they raised whatever money they did raise, for their campaign. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's, I guess if there were, can either one of you think of any downsides or challenges if it were nonpartisan? Because you're bringing up positives,
I don't know that there's a downside other than the fact that people might not do their homework and know how somebody might vote on an issue based on their party affiliation.
is the concern that they wouldn't vote then in that case?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think that's it.
I think you guys already covered the potential benefits.
A potential downside that I've heard that I don't agree with is that people might look at the last names of the individuals and then vote for people based on, I'm Italian, I'm gonna vote for the Italian. Chinese, I vote for the Chinese last name.
Might they do that anyway?
But I think that does happen anyway, but I also think what's interesting is,
Yeah.
I think your election, the charter commission, you had 14 people running. And looking at what I see here, I don't think people did. I think people,
They didn't vote by last name?
I don't think they voted based on,
There she is too.
Yeah, I just
Nationality.
Maybe it is a connection.
No, I think the uninformed voter is always gonna find something to latch onto, or I think quite honestly, they'll leave it blank, because again, there was a discrepancy between the total number of people that voted and the number of people that actually voted to the charter commission for this.
Right, they're less interested in that, or less informed, and therefore they don't want to cast the vote.
I've
Okay.
had friends who were uninformed that didn't vote for me. Turn it around.
It's like, oh,
I
you
just
ran?
had a quick follow-up.
I didn't even get
Dave,
that.
I think I know the answer based on what Frank was saying. Do you think having partisan elections encourages or discourages or deters certain individuals from running? I think, Frank, if I'm paraphrasing what you said, you think it deters the unaffiliated voter from running. I'm paraphrasing what you said.
Yeah, I think
Frank.
not just the unaffiliated voter, but I think it deters voters. Even if you are aligned with one party or another, if that's like an unpopular party, you might be reticent to run and have everyone know, what your party is, and have to, go along with all the baggage that comes along with that. And I think that goes for either party.
Right, you have a view on this, Dave, whether it deters or encourages people from running? Partisan?
I think it probably does, yeah, not probably, I think it
Probably
does.
the
Yeah, I think it'd be hard to run as an independent.
So if you're not running under a party label, you'll choose not to run. So it's deterring
I'm
individuals from
sure
coming
that
forward
there's
to
people
serve
who
on the
just flat out
CCS.
say I'm not doing it because I'm not affiliated with a party. I don't wanna be affiliated with a party maybe, or I try, but
I'm just trying to understand if you think there is a qualitative impact, meaning some people are not gonna stand up for this position or run for a TC position because they just don't wanna be affiliated, is what I'm hearing from this. I don't wanna be labeled as a certain person.
Yeah, I can say, I'm on the local public committee. Job of the committee statutorily is to identify candidates. And there have been candidates we approached that are unaffiliated, and we said, you agree with us on a lot of these local issues, would you be willing to run? Would you be willing, you'd have to change parties, because to run under the label, you have to change parties. And we've had some great people say, no, I can't bring myself to, give myself a party label. He said, whether it was the Democrats asking me or the Republicans, I don't want to get caught up in those party labels. So I think it absolutely does deter unaffiliated voters.
One more follow-up, that's okay, because I think the point you just brought up And I would like to ask that of both of you and probably weigh in because I've never worked in corporate America, being self-employed. I've had folks tell me that they don't like, who I've approached and said, you'd be a great candidate. They have been unaffiliated. They're like, my job would prevent me from being affiliated and therefore I can't. And for other reasons as well, like my job won't let me because it could cause controversy. So do you have any experience in your legal brain and your corporate and?
Definitely companies don't like, I don't want to speak for every company, but you know, there's definitely in corporate America, you know, most companies are not gonna want you to run for a political office
At all, or
At
because
all.
you have to affiliate
at all.
at all?
You have that problem, David.
So, I come from buying world for asset management firms, hedge funds. And what I've seen in that industry is they often will not let you run in a partisan election, but they will let you run in a nonpartisan election.
Right, that's what certain people told me, and I just wasn't sure
So
from.
I've absolutely seen that, to be the case, and that has to do with the pay to play laws. You know, to some extent, but also more so. So the pay to play laws really only come into effect if that company, so let's say you're a hedge fund, you know, if you manage retirement fund that might be the town that you're in, that would be a conflict. You can't do that. There's rules there, but you know, a lot of companies now, it's such a polarized, you know, country. They don't want to get tied to one side or the other, and if they have a candidate, you know, that's running in a local election as a Democrat or a Republican, you know, that can bubble up. I mean, there were news articles written by Bloomberg that mentioned me as a Republican, and I remember I was at work and people, you know, looking at their Bloomberg terminals, they came up to me and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know you were a Republican, and you were elected," and you know, the company's not happy about the fact that they're getting associated with one or another. Also, I think it is limiting, and there's a lot of people in town working jobs, finance or corporate jobs that, you know, those partisan elections would prevent them from participating.
Even if the company doesn't have an issue with it, I know there might be people who would be reticent to run because you make a website and then you look for a new job and, hey, what if the person that was gonna hire you is one party or the other, and it's like, oh, that person's that party, forget it, I'll go with the next candidate or something. So I mean, even if there's no strict prohibition, you know, it might be a limiter plate for some people to get involved.
Well, we spoke with a few municipal workers who said they specifically unaffiliated when they got a government job because they didn't want residents to feel one way or another about them. And it was interesting. It was an interview that you and I sat on, and it was very interesting. I hadn't really thought of it from that standpoint ever. Because I don't think personally, I think, oh, I've never judged you based on that, but I didn't really think about it, nor would I go look them up. But it was something that was felt by that person. And I was like, that's an interesting comment that you go unaffiliated, because I've never been unaffiliated. So.
Well, I worked in corporate America for a gazillion years and they wouldn't let, you know, run, you know, and, but I had to give to their freaking pack. I didn't agree with, so there.
Oh, back to you,
Oh, back to
Speedy.
me. Come on.
Back
All
to
right,
you,
I'm
Speedy.
I'm
You're
sorry.
gonna go Speedy, because
All right.
unless you guys have any follow-ups, I know that was an important section.
Yeah, it wasn't.
So I know we took a lot more time than our allotment stated here for 15 minutes.
Right.
So CD, I know you can speak through. The next is more about functionality.
Okay, how the TC functions. How would you describe the working relationship among TC members during your time? And did you work collaboratively across party lines, or were there divisions? Dave, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
that one.
I think we all work very well together. No complaints. I voted for it.
Good. True. Frank?
For mayor. Clarify that.
There you go.
So, I mean, I found that I can work with anyone. It doesn't matter what their party is. And that's just me. I don't know if other TC members in the past would be willing to cross party lines. I think when you do the interviews of former TC members, especially when there was more diversity in terms of parties, it'll be interesting to see what you hear. But for me, I'm able to work collaboratively. I will say, I'll take my relationship with Annette, for example. At the very beginning, we were much more collaborative. But that totally went away when we had the election last year and she was running. And it created, I think the fact that it was partisan, it created this unnecessary tension. And I think if we were nonpartisan, that wouldn't necessarily have happened. It wouldn't have been us versus them mentality. So I think the partisan structure creates unnecessary tension when it doesn't need to be there.
Well, you just answered the next question, and so I'm gonna skip that.
But let Dave answer
Dave,
part one, and then we'll move to
yeah.
part two for you as well, so you can have a chance to
Right.
opine.
Part one though is which question?
How would you describe
Sorry.
the working relationship among TC members during your time? Did you work collaboratively across party lines, or were there divisions?
I think we all work together.
As you said.
I don't think there were differences.
So I guess the part two, you should
Part two.
answer, because I think you started, sorry about that.
In your experience, what causes tension or disagreements on the TC? Policy differences, personal conflicts, partisan considerations, or something else?
I just think it's difference of opinion and policies, have vote on certain things.
Great, thank you. Are TC meetings generally focused on policy and big picture decisions, or do they sometimes get into operational details? Dave,
I
please.
think primarily policy, but there's certainly operational details that get into.
It's a little of both, I would say. I mean, it should be more policy, big picture. But sometimes things come up and people are unhappy, and then you start to look under the hood and start going through these operational details, and that can sometimes I wouldn't say there's micromanaging, but people do get a little bit more involved if there's problems that they'll look to the surface, and then you take a look at the operational aspect.
Great. Structural questions. Currently, the TC selects the mayor from among its members. How well does that process work? Would it be better if voters directly elected a mayor? Dave, since you were the tiebreaker. You take that one.
Leading the way.
Mixed on it. I think an elected mayor is a good idea. I don't think a strong elected mayor is a good idea. And there's in betweens there. You could make, instead of the way we do the mayor now, you could have the mayor be the person who got the most votes, of the people that are nominated, or something like that, or that, and even if that was done informally, something like that, as opposed to a rigid thing. But I mean, you all of you have seen over the years the election of the mayor. Sometimes it's it's unanimous, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's like this past time.
Yes.
For a second, just because in case the public is watching the recorded version and may not understand what strong mayor is, the strong mayor actually has leadership powers and control and more administrative. An honorary mayor is what our government certainly right now has. And even we have the ability to recommend another strong mayor or honorary mayor. So right now we're talking about the honorary mayor position that you guys elect amongst or vote for amongst yourselves in your group of five. So.
Frank?
Your turn.
So yeah, I just went through this, and I think that you have to have a directly elected mayor. I think the way that we've been doing it is unsustainable. It leads to a lot of unnecessary animosity amongst TC members. Even when it was single party. I've heard stories from those TC members about all the backroom deals and the backstabbing, and it really, created disunity and disharmony. And I think it affected the quality of the governance, at least in the months that preceded. I think people held grudges. So I think directly elected mayor is absolutely the way to go. Now, to be clear, I think a strong mayor would be an absolute disaster for this. And I'll explain why. We are a town of very highly accomplished individuals. A lot of people in this town, they work, and if we had a directly elected mayor, it would take a certain type of person to give up their job and go run for mayor, or then you'd be limited to people that are retired or didn't have a job. So I think that you would not end up with the quality individual that you would need that would be able to do basically what Alex does, right? The business administrator as a strong mayor, they tend to, while there are some forms that also have a business administrator, they have more of an executive role and executive function. And I also think that, every 2, 4, whatever the election cycle is, for you to lose that individual and then have someone else come in and have to take over all of those executive functions, you're gonna have a lot of discontinuity there. I think that's gonna affect services. There's gonna be too much change. So I would say directly elected weak mayor would be my recommendation.
And weak means honorary, just so people who are watching, strong and weak just mean,
Yes.
a job versus honorary, and your biggest power is to marry somebody and to sign off on emergency management
Right.
and go to social events.
There are certain state statutorily defined bodies like the planning board, the zoning board, that the mayor has the power to do appointments, and some of them are with the consent of the TC. But even with a weak mayor form of government, that's like one of the few extra things. There's certain appointments you get as mayor. Now, what we've done is we've tried to, at least with all of the boards and committees that aren't controlled by state statute, we've changed those so that they're by majority of the TC.
Okay, that's cool.
Thank you. Currently, and think about this one, please. Currently,
As
Milburn.
opposed to the other ones where you.
As opposed to the other. Currently, Milburn has a 5-member township committee. The reason how come I said think about it is because we're getting various statements from former TC members. That's how come I wanted you folks to think about this. Based on your experience, is that the right size, or would a larger or smaller governing body work better, and why? Dave, if you don't mind taking that one first.
Very hard question, right?
It is.
Because to me, the concept of 5 or 7 or some odd number, the idea is you have an odd number. So it takes 3 people or 4 people depending on the issue, right? So I don't know that there's a lot of difference between 5 and 7. I do think that, as you folks consider this and come up with your report, if you make it 7 or 9 or, pick a larger number, it gets tougher to find people that want to volunteer to do it. And I can't think of a time when I was either watching committee meetings or, now that I'm on it, where I thought 5 versus 7 was going to make a difference on something. So, I'm comfortable with the 5. Could I say you're wrong if you made a 7? No.
Gotcha.
But it would make it tougher to get, more people. You need 7 people.
Right, more small.
Thank you. Frank?
So I think 5 makes it difficult because 3 is a quorum, right? And so we're limited to only being able to have one-on-one conversations, and I think you guys are,
Experiencing
experiencing
that.
the joys of the Open Public Meetings Act and quorums. I think 9, the school board has 9. I think that's too many. That's unwieldy. But you know what? Every year we seem to have plenty of people running for school board, and there's 9 positions. So I think if we had 7 instead of 5, that would be the happy medium. I think we would be able to find people, especially if you staggered the elections. If you did elections every 2 years, for instance, I think you wouldn't have trouble finding people, especially nonpartisan too, to run. And also, you know, it would allow the subcommittees, you'd have subcommittees of 3, so you'd have better decision making. Instead of just 2 people, you'd have that third person, that third opinion on the subcommittees. And then there's also, you know, a mathematical argument to make, you know, with 7 people, you can spread more of the work around, right? So right now, there's 5 of us, and there's a ton of committees, and there's new committees that we want to form that'll be really beneficial to the town, but we're all stretched really thin. I think Ben, for instance, is on like 7 committees. And you know, I'm on several committees, and some of those committees, like the planning board, that's a huge commitment. That's a big time suck right there. So if you had 7 people, I think we'd be able to spread the work out more. I think we'd get more done. There'd be more people to champion initiatives. Now, I would imagine the township employees might prefer 5 versus 7 or 9, because when you have more people that are active in doing things, more is going to be asked of them, right? But more will get done. So I think 7 is probably the right number.
Do you think more would get done, given the learning curve? Or do you think, like, if not everyone's an active person, and to your point a little earlier, let's say you have a dud. You said, what if someone's elected as a dud? You have them for those 4 years potentially, if that's where it goes. Now you have 7. What if those productive conversations with a group of 3 are not so productive, and you talk to the 4th person when you now switch, you know, your groups of 3, and you can't find a point of community and coming together, and could it cause more arguments on the flip side, just to play devil's advocate for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a meeting and you have 7 people that all have to weigh in and have an opinion, obviously the meetings are going to take a little bit longer. But I think you're going to get better diversity of thought. I think that you're going to get a better outcome by having more voices at the table, especially if you're nonpartisan, you don't have, you know, party influences. I think that in this case more is better, but I think 9 would be too much. I think that would be way too unwieldy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Currently, all TC members are elected at large. Would ward-based representation be better, worse, and why? Dave, please.
Yeah, I think ward would be a lot of people, right? How many, I haven't counted the wards, but that'd be more than 7 for sure, right? You know, so I'd say, I don't think ward's better. I mean, people, you know, voters might feel better about the ward, because then if you lived in Glenwood, you've got, you know, a Glenwood person that you go to. And you know, whatever section it is, so. It's back to the voter versus, you know, how I feel about it.
So the problem with ward-based voting, especially in our town, where we're Milburn Short Hills, right? There would be more wards in Short Hills. And I don't know how the Milburn people would feel about that, right? There's already, unfortunately, there's been former TC members that have tried to stoke division between Milburn versus Short Hills. And something that I've worked very hard to try and eradicate, because we're all one town. But you know, I think if you had a ward-based system, there would be parts of town that feel underrepresented. So I don't think that would be a benefit.
That's a good point.
Thank you. Milburn has a strong business administrative structure. Where the BA has broad supervisory authority over departments and day-to-day operations. Based on your experience, how well does the current division of responsibilities between the TC and BA work in practice? Dave, please.
Yeah, I think it works fine. So, and you know, they hit number 2, Tip, the second one, I wouldn't expand, reduce, leave the same, the VA's responsibilities.
Say that again, please.
I wouldn't expand or reduce the VA's responsibilities.
Great, thank you. And a second part, Dave answered that, Frank. Should the VA's authority be expanded or reduced or stay the same?
I think it's important that we have a business administrator. I don't think I would expand or contract the amount of responsibilities they have. I think there's a lot that's on the business administrator's plate, and so, you know, if I were to make a suggestion, I honestly think maybe you need 2 assistant VAs.
Let's take on him.
Yeah, you know, I think people don't realize how much actually falls on town hall and municipal employees, especially, you know, people at Alex's level. So, I would continue to have a VA structure. You know, I would like to see, I think one of the problems with our form of government is, you know, right now the VA doesn't have any sort of protection against majority just getting rid of them at a whim. And I've heard stories of prior TCs say, well, Mr. Business Administrator, you know, you're gonna do it our way here. We're gonna get rid of you, right? And I think hopefully with these newer forms of government, there's some sort of mechanism where there's some sort of hearing or some sort of protection where you could have a VA say, hey, wait a minute, you know, majority says this, I disagree with it, and trying to get rid of me, but I want to go on the record and be able to explain myself. I think that would be safer, because the VA does help provide continuity. You know, as the TC members change, we've only had 2 VAs in our town history.
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna, next section, I'm gonna please give to Commissioner Joanna Parker.
Thank you very much. We're on the home stretch, gang. Let's start with Mr. Cosgrove. What are the biggest strengths of Millburn's current form of government?
I think the biggest strength of the current form is that we're all working together. And, you know, the TC members. So I think that's a testament to 5 people is a good number, you know, et cetera.
Is that the form of government or is that the people that you have?
Well, that's the people, but I think that's, you know, I think in any form of government, if you want me
It's the
to
people.
riff around on that a little bit, any form of government, whether it's 7 people, whether it's nonpartisan, partisan,
It's the people.
people make a difference.
And are there any specific things that you could think of? You were saying 5 you were happy with, the length of time. I guess we'll go, can I just ask Dave both the strengths and the weaknesses, and we'll go to you just so we can have, you know, as you're thinking about it. And I guess you can compare and contrast, what are the biggest weaknesses, and we can flip flop back and forth and riff if you like. If you have a biggest weakness factor, which I think we touched upon a little bit earlier, but if you wanted to extrapolate and expand.
Oh, I had one note, I had a note on weakness.
And we can go to Frank for a moment and then come back to you for the weakness too.
The other Frank.
Yeah, let's do strengths.
If he doesn't mind,
It's your second on me.
Sure.
Strengths.
So, I think the biggest strength of our current form of government is we're all at large. We don't have like a ward-based system. I think that's a positive. I think that having the honorary / weak mayor is a strength of the government. I'd like to see that continue. Got a lot more on the negatives to say, but yes, about the strengths. Right, you can ask about the weaknesses.
Not yet.
Okay, strengths. I think having I covered weak mayor, at large.
Strong
I mean,
VA.
Yeah, you've talked about the
Yeah,
strong VA was
strong
one of
strong
your
VA.
points.
I mean, that sort of comes along with strong mayor versus weak mayor, right?
So we have those things
We
already.
have those things,
right?
yeah, those
So
are
that's
things
not-
that I would recommend
Got it.
keeping, those are build their strengths.
You ready for a weakness over there?
Yeah, I think one of the weaknesses that, even to one of your questions or kind of in fashion is, projects that get dropped. Chris has commented too, or picked up. A weakness for sure, between terms, but it can be a strength too. And I had my notes here, complete streets. As an example, right? So that was gung ho for phase one, I'll call it. Phase two never happened, right? A bunch of people got voted out of office, I think, as a result of phase one. So, it's good in a sense, right? That we have people that, and projects don't necessarily have to get finished and seen through. If people change their minds or the voters change their minds. So.
Could that be perceived as a weakness if something doesn't get finished though? Is that, do you think that's an election cycle length of time problem? Or that person picked a bad thing to champion and now they're voted out and we're good?
They picked a bad thing to champion and voted out, but it's a project that doesn't get completed, so. And I think that's what I had, had it as the,
You said you have a lot more negatives. And you can chime in after in case you're like, oh,
Yeah,
there's
no,
more
I'm
negatives too.
interested. I could miss something.
I'm curious too.
Or I hope maybe a lot of it.
So I think the frequency of our elections is a weakness. I think every year it's not a good idea. I think that the fact that it's partisan is a weakness. Honestly, I think five is the wrong number. I think it's too few. I think we'd get a lot more done if we had more easy methods. So I'd say that's a weakness. So I think that by not being a alternate form of government, we lack certain modern features that would have been very beneficial. So recall, initiative, referendum. So for example, when the affordable housing ordinances were put into place several years ago, if we had those modern features, those ordinances could have been overturned, utilizing some of these modern features at a referendum. I also think there's something like complete streets. That's another perfect example, right? That was something that you had the committee was all gung ho about, public didn't like it. That's something that they could have undone or stopped without having to wait and change out the majority of the government. So the Township Committee Form of Government is one of the oldest forms of government that exists in the state, and I think it's obsolete. And those are definitely weaknesses.
Just as a point, I think all forms of government have recall, so.
Yeah, in the Constitution.
Okay. So it's
Have it.
initiative and
We actually had a recall in our town a couple of years ago, so
we did.
it would just be initiative and referendum.
The initiative and referendum is a good idea. Meaning citizens being able to do that rather than having to need our permission.
yeah.
To do the
And it
two
also allows
first.
them to get something on the ballot. They can do a binding referendum. So something like the open space trust fund. That's something that people had wanted for years, but the PC didn't want to take it on. Or the restrictions on gas powered leak blowers. That's something that had been talked about for years and years. And I'm pretty sure if we had that feature, we would have gone to a referendum before that. Then the voters would have opposed to the TC. So
Power to the people.
Just to play devil's advocate there, if the whole idea of elections and having people represent us is that not everybody spends the time to make every decision, right? So having a power of referendum, do you think takes away a little bit from that? Meaning you are choosing people to make certain decisions for you as a town, and then if you don't like it, so you're just gonna go back and have everybody again study that issue and whatever.
it's a fair question, but I think there's a barrier. There's a certain threshold you have to get to in order to get a referendum on the ballot. You need a certain number of signatures, and I think it's not an insignificant number. And so if you look at towns that have these modern features, you don't see like, there being 20 referendums in any given year. So I think it's used more judiciously and strategically. So I don't think it will end up causing every little issue to go to a referendum. I think having the option is a benefit, not a
Well, we have one final question. Almost final, second to final. If you could change one thing about how township committee operates or is elected, what would it be? You could also say nothing, I suppose.
I mean, we've made, I'll make the comment, it doesn't mean we haven't made a lot of progress on this over the, over the last, let's say, year and a half, but transparency. I still think that's an issue. And I still occasionally feel like we're going back to the dark age when, no one was told anything. But it's so much better than it used to be, but I think I still think we have to fight to keep that, to keep us on the right path there. The transparency part.
Frank?
One thing that I could change, I would change the entire form of government.
Easy
To a
answer.
Faulkner
All right.
form of government,
Faulkner,
nonpartisan elections, and I would have 7 instead of 5.
Well, that's many things,
That would be what I would do. Well, you said one thing, so I picked something that encompassed.
all of it. Got it, it has all of it, I got it. Is there anything we have not asked you that you think is important for us to understand or consider about how Milburn's government works to make our jobs more fundamentally transparent and inclusive when we're trying to make some decisions?
And I think we covered everything, other than just thank you folks for doing this. It's important work and appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. I think, kudos to you guys. I think this is long overdue. I think we're finally at a point where people in town are starting to understand, the issues. I think some of the things that we've gone through with the overdevelopment and all that opened people's eyes to, the fact that we have a local government and, that people run for this and that these decisions that they make impact their day-to-day lives. So I think it's awesome the work that you guys are doing. That very excited to see what you all come up with.
Chinook, do you have something or,
Yeah.
great. Corey, are you good?
I'm good.
Dr. Khan? Yeah,
No,
good.
I'll talk to you.
Thank you, Mayor and Deputy Mayor, for your time and your insights, and we really appreciate you folks coming here.
And working on our behalf as well. You
Yeah.
guys are elected for a lot longer than we are.
Yeah.
We're only here for
So
under a
you-
year.
So you're dismissed. Unless you want to
You're free to stay.
25 hours was 25 hours is an eye opener. That's a lot of time that's being spent.
Yes.
Lot, so that's per week.
Next item, under old business, community outreach.
Yeah, so I may have mentioned it in my prior report, so we did get the TAP and the patch to publish the article. I think that was true of the last meeting as well, or
I think-
no, I think it came out after, yeah.
Okay.
And then I was at the TP meeting. So.
And I keep sending my listserv emails with a host of BCCs. I don't know if anybody else here is sharing WhatsApp groups. I'm hoping that everyone's doing their, come to the meetings, share.
My friend Jeff and I, we remember the item. I wish we had the item.
Karen, bring back Karen.
That's right. Thank you, Dr. Public comment. To speak during the public comment period, please follow these instructions. Ensure your Zoom display name shows your first and last name. Click the raised hand button. You will be called upon in order and promoted to panelists. Please turn on your video when called to speak. Clearly state your full name and whether you are a Milburn resident or business owner. Facilitate an orderly meeting and permit all to be heard. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. A reminder that the public comment period is an opportunity for residents to share their views with the commission. Commissioners will not respond to question or engage in dialogue during your speaking time, but will carefully consider all comments. At the end of public comment period, questions and discussion may be addressed at the chair's discretion. Do you want to take the Zoom first?
Anyone on the Zoom wishes to speak, please raise your hand now. No one wishes to speak online.
Anyone from the audience?
Yeah, I'm Jeff Feld. I live in the poet section. I want to thank everyone, especially, I wasn't here last time, so I was at the Board of Education Strategic Planning, but I want to thank the current board, TC members who came and spoke. The only question you might want to look into when you do the research, which is if we go to say 7 TC members, you might be able to get a hybrid where you have maybe 4 ward and 3 at large, and that you might want to consider when other municipalities, if they have more than 5, if they go to 7, do they break it up to like a hybrid, like 4 ward and 3 at large? That's something to consider. At the last meeting, there was a lot of conversations about 4th of July committee. And hopefully, I know 2 of you remembered. Go look in the box. I think my aprons are there for my company. But 30 years ago, I donated. We used to donate to everything for that. There is an issue that might come up because after your last meeting on Wednesday, and this is something that the TC might have to look at, is oversight of advisory boards and whether they actually have reorganization meetings or have extended their powers or used their authority for improper uses. And that's something that might have to be looked into. What happened on Wednesday morning.
Can you elaborate on that, Jeff, please?
There'll be more elaborations on at the TC meeting. There was the CETA committee I was appointed to. They had the meeting. It was supposed to be a reorganization meeting. It didn't come out to reorganization meeting. It ended up being a discussion about a mural that's going to be done for the 4th of July celebration of the tournament. And the question was, how many participants do they have? I raised that they ignored or did not reach out to the Historical Black Church. And because of my contact with Reverend Maribel through Orange, I reached out and I started questioning why certain organizations weren't approached or why certain organizations were granted. There's going to be like 250 tiles, I think, there at this time. At that time, there was like 46 participants, and certain people had like 8 tiles. And the question is, did this mural that's going to represent the 4th of July, it's going to be in front of the library, eventually maybe be put in town hall, did it really represent what the 4th of July celebration should be doing and who had the power and authority to determine, who were the tiles were going to be. That's thank you, not.
Thank you. Anyone else? It's not. All right. I now close the public comment period. Are there any comments from the commission regarding any comments made by the public?
I'm aware of what occurred at the CETA meeting, but I think that might be outside of our jurisdiction as to what our mandate is in terms of
Policy.
Certainly, if there is something systemic with regard to how the current form of government has created different advisory boards, I think
Or
we can
redundancy?
I think redundancy is something that did come up in one of our interviews. So I don't know if we can necessarily or we can certainly make recommendations as to here's a form of government, here's also some other best practices that might be considered. But that would be
Right, so
incumbent
best
on.
practices for oversight and redundancy.
Yeah.
So it's like to bring it up as, this is what we've noted and observed based on comments that have come out from interviews and public comments. Okay.
Thank you.
How about this one? May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Ooh.
So moved. Second? No?
I third.
Great.
Great to vote on.
Oh, yeah, let's vote.
Aye.
Great. Thank you, thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Yeah.
everyone for being
Thank you
here.